Well, good afternoon. My name is Harriette Lowery, and I live in Unionville, a village here in Talbot County, Maryland. I will be presenting to you a little history on the founding of our village and the connection my family has to Unionville.
Excuse me, can everyone hear? A little louder. Maybe could you talk a little louder, Heather?
Okay.
Justin, can you adjust the volume? Well, no, because she's the volume.
I just want to do that one.
So if you could talk just a little louder, or maybe sit a little closer, that might help. Here's the microphone.
My family would really laugh at this. But I want you to know that my story is truly a work in progress. I have recently found that there are several members of the Unionville families doing research on their family and their story. And my hope is that we can get together at some point to share what we have learned. I'm also hoping to find more relatives than I have. I want to thank my friend Peggy Ford, Don Miller, and Doug T for their support and encouragement. I was not going to stop. I was not a willing participant, and they would not take no as my mom. I would also like to thank my friend Brenda Rubin for listening to me practice this presentation over and over. A couple of times, I believe, he acted like he was not home when I stopped by. Some time ago, I put together this presentation for my family, especially my grandsons, about our family. As I have said, it continues to be a work in progress. My goal is to have my grandsons, nieces, and nephews continue the family story by adding pictures and more stories. I hope that my story can encourage others to research, discover, record, pass on, and preserve their family's history, their family's story. It is important for me to relay to our African American children that there is greatness in them, that they are more than a sum of what they hear and learn on TV, and that they are much more than the negative labels people try to place on them. I want them to hear the message, don't give in, don't give up, but stand up and be the very best you can be. I believe this message can be for anybody, and anybody can pass it on to every child in every family, because everybody has a story. And I also say that because when I found out about the 18 soldiers, for me, immediately I thought about heroes, and never really thinking about heroes in our family or even back in the 1800s. And so when I realized that we had heroes in our family, that made a big difference, and I think it will with others. This afternoon, I give this presentation to honor three very strong and faith-filled women that touched my life, made me who I am, and taught me so much about faith, life, strength, integrity, giving, caring, love, and so much more. Mrs. Dola Heyman, who took so much pride in belonging to Unionville, and who encouraged me to collect the history and promote Unionville. My aunt, Martha Ray Chase Green, a teacher from the age of 8 until she died at 98. She was a teacher who other teachers held in high esteem. She insisted on perfection, and as she got older, she became more gentle in her insistence. She was in her 90s for that. She graduated from Boyd College in 1932 and taught for 44 years in the Talbot County school system. But most of all, my mother, Adela Green Lilly Henry. She believed her children could be anything they wanted to be as long as they had a foundation of faith, love of family, they studied hard, worked hard, and showed respect for others. Now, for my mother, it was God, family, and the people who lived in Unionville. I had learned over time that it's really all the same. When I was growing up, my immediate family lived in Easton, the town. And my grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins lived in Unionville, the country. We visited Unionville every Sunday after church to have dinner with the entire Green family. In the summer of 1963, my immediate family moved to Baltimore. My mother, until the day she died, never stopped talking about Unionville and never stopped loving Unionville and the people. I'll also say that my mother, when we were living in Baltimore, my mother came to Unionville at least once a month and sometimes twice a month. And sometimes she would get anybody, almost anybody, but any one of my cousins who moved to Baltimore to bring her down here and bring her back. That's how much she loved Unionville. And she always would say, I'm going home today. I'm going down to Unionville. She would never say Unionville. She never said Unionville. And I have to ask people about that. She always said Miles River. And there's something about the older ones. They would always say they were going to Miles River. So that's part of something else I have to look at. But I wanted to say that if you were Black and it was during the segregation years and you were from Unionville, if you left for an hour, a day, or a year, you could not wait to get back to the village where everybody was glad to see you. You knew everybody. You could trust everyone, and you felt safe. My family did not speak of the 18 soldiers. They spoke more often about the church and how it was the center of everything that happened in Unionville. They also spoke about the friendship that lasted a lifetime. That was the reference I had. Once I learned about the 18 soldiers, I wanted to know more, but didn't really know how or where to start. At the time, I lived in Baltimore, and the story was on the Eastern Shore. But as my mother would say, God works in mysterious ways. So today, I will try to give you a short version of my search. In 1998, my husband, Eric, and I had the opportunity to purchase my grandparents' property, their home. And before the demolition of the house, it was suggested that we take another look inside to see if it was anything that we might want. I knew that over time, several of my cousins had been in the house, and I thought there could not possibly be anything left in there, especially of importance. And side note, I'm afraid of snakes, and everybody told me that there were snakes. So I was not going in, but bless my husband, he gently pushed me in to do one last check. The only thing I could ever really want that might be in the house were pictures. And that's because pictures to me can tell a story all on their own. Or at least they can start a conversation. But you have got to put a date and a name on the back of the picture. Believe me. As my cousin Corinne would always say, lo and behold, which I think is an Eastern Shore slang, there was a portrait on the floor in plaster, dust, and dirt. Not in the frame or anything. I had no idea who it was, but knew it had to be somebody in my family. Over the next year, I took a picture to relatives still living to ask who it might be. And my Aunt B was 92 at that time, and my cousin Marguerite was around 80. And they all said the same thing. That's Agnes Denby. That's Agnes Denby. And I learned that it was my mother's grandmother, Agnes Denby Green, my grandfather's mother. I knew that 2 of the 18 soldiers were named Denby, Benjamin and Charles. Through research at the Maryland Archives of Census Records, I learned that Benjamin was Agnes's father. After reading Frederick Douglass's narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, in chapter 4, Mr. Douglass was 8 years old when he witnessed the murder of a slave named Denby. So I had more research to do. And in 2004, Dr. Mark Leone, an archaeologist from the University of Maryland, College Park, came to St. Stephen's AME Church in Unionville to talk about the dig at the White House farm. And he wanted to know, what would the people of Unionville want to learn from the dig? My Aunt Ray wanted to know if the slaves had a religious life. I had 2 requests. One was Denby in Frederick Douglass's book one of my relatives? And what country in Africa did the enslaved people come from? Dr. Leone promised he and his students would do their best to get answers for us. Well, thanks to the Tillmans for allowing the dig, the Lloyds for keeping such good records on their slaves, Dr. Leone for keeping his promise, and also Dr. Bernard Gimshuck for his dissertation on Unionville. I know that Denby was Agnes's great-grandfather, which makes me the 7th generation descendant of William Denby. So now I believe I know why my family never spoke of anything in the past. You don't forget the murder of a family member under such horrible conditions, but you make choices to survive. When emancipation came, it set them on the course to be free. And they looked forward, moved their families forward, and never really looked back. Sorry. There was some side notes, so I'll wait the question and answer for that.
Did you have a slide change?
Pardon me, yes. Now I'm going to talk about the 18 soldiers. The Unionville 18. The story of Unionville, the enduring heritage of the 18 Black soldiers. John Blackwell, Annals Clayton, Isaac Cowper, John Cooper, Benjamin Denby, Charles Denby, William Durant, Horace Gibson, Zachary Glasgow, Joseph Goodby, Joseph H. Johnson, Peter Johnson, Edward Jones, Annals Money, Frederick Pipes, Henry Roberts, and Matthew Roberts. United States colored troop veterans who served in the Civil War from 1863 to 1866. These 18 Black men had the courage to overcome the horror of slavery and the terror of Civil War, to accomplish something as great as creating a village. There were men, Black men, former enslaved, and some free Black men, veterans of war, and they came back to the plantation with nothing, but knew there had to be more. They wanted to live as free men and raise their families free. They did not steal for their freedom, lie for it, or cheat for it, but they did pay a price. Can you imagine 100 of your friends leaving the only home you have known as a slave, going off to fight in a war, and you don't even know if it's going to make a difference or will make a difference in your family's life? But you pray that it does, and only 18 of you return? Well, that's exactly what these very brave men did. We know that Mr. Henry Roberts came back with only one leg. There were others wounded as well. These men had to be shattered in so many ways, but they worked hard for the opportunity to have a better life. In 1867, these 18 former slaves and freedmen of color founded Unionville, a village in Talbot County, between Easton and St. Michael's. These men lived and worked on the Y and Lombardy plantations, part of which is now the village of Unionville. In 1863, when President Abraham Lincoln allowed blacks to fight in the war, many enlisted, and some were even sold into the army. History records that more than 100 colored men left the Lombardy and nearby Y plantation to fight for the Union Army, hoping to win freedom for themselves and their families. The Lombardy plantation was owned by a Quaker named Ezekiel Collins, whose son John also served in the Union Army. When the 18 colored veterans returned to the plantation, Ezekiel Collins decided to lease each of them a parcel of land for $1 a month for 30 years, with two stipulations. They had to provide a church for their families and a school for their children. The congregation and first church structure was formed in 1871, and the St. Stephen's AME Church, that still stands with an active congregation today, was built in 1892. All 18 of the Union soldiers are buried in a cemetery behind the church, with United States Colored Troop 7th Infantry, 7th Regiment, Army headstones as their markers. Now, how was Unionville in 18 been promoted thus far? Well, on November the 11th, 1998, 132 years after the Civil War, for the very first time, the 18 soldiers were honored for their service to this country, with markers detailing their accomplishments. One sign can be seen on entering Unionville, while the other stands in front of the church cemetery. Retired General Albert Hunter uncovered their service history. The 18 served in the Union Army's 7th Regiment Infantry Volunteers from 1863 to 1866. The St. Stephen's AME Church Steering Committee, made of Reverend William Holt, Martha Green, Dola Heyman, Linwood Heyman, Virginia Heyman, Marion Kellum, Francis Mondowney, Burton and Hilda Wilson, and William R. Roberts. With General Hunter's assistance, they were able to find all 18 soldiers' graves behind the cemetery. In 1999, Bernard Demchuk, a doctoral candidate at George Washington University, begins his research and his dissertation on the history of Unionville. He wrote a book on Unionville and donated part of the proceeds to St. Stephen's AME Church. In November of 2001, the African American Civil War Memorial in Washington, D.C. honored the 18 Union soldiers with a Veterans Day ceremony. Unionville residents, members of St. Stephen's AME Church, and descendants of the original 18 soldiers were the guests of honor at the memorial's annual wreath-laying ceremony. In July 2004, the Maryland Department of Business and Economic Development Destination Resource Development Division erected a Civil War Trails marker on the site of the St. Stephen's AME Church Cemetery. On Veterans Day, November the 11th, 2004, the then Lieutenant Governor Michael Steele, with William R. Roberts, the CEO of Verizon, who is the great-great-grandson of one of the 18 soldiers, along with many other descendants, unveiled that Civil War Trails marker. In July of 2007, Arts and Eastern Banner program, the artist Patrick Rogan chose to promote Unionville by painting 2 original works on canvas banners that were displayed on light poles at the Talbot County Courthouse in Easton. Reprints of the church and the 18 soldiers were presented to the church by Patrick Rogan in February of 2008. Also in February of 2008, Bernard Jimchuk gave his dissertation defense at George Washington University Law Center. 17 members of St. Stephen's and residents and descendants of the 18 founders traveled to Washington, D.C. for the occasion. April 2008, the Maryland House and Garden Pilgrims toured. Their tour included St. Stephen's AME Church and Cemetery, and they included the village of Unionville as a part of their tour of historic sites in Talbot County. Now, how do we preserve the history of Unionville at this point? In 1990, the Maryland Historic Trust and the Talbot County Historic District Commission, with the support of the Talbot County Office of Planning and Zoning, commissioned a professional investigation of 3 historic Black communities. Unionville was one of them. The final survey report stated, quote, "One of the most distinctive buildings is the old Unionville School. Standing next to the school is the Unionville Odd Fellows Lodge, a turn of the 20th century frame structure that has survived largely intact. Unionville is an important rural Black village that may stem from one of the few Talbot County free Black communities. The survey sites in Unionville document enough architectural and historic significance to warrant listing on the National Register of Historic Places. The Unionville School, as well as the Odd Fellows Lodge, are important survivors representing the social, education, and cultural dimensions of the 19th and 20th century village." End of quote. In 2001, there was a small organized group of concerned citizens who tried to purchase the property and preserve the schoolhouse and the Odd Fellows Lodge. But the owner, a local resident, chose money over history. In the summer of 2002, the schoolhouse and the lodge were burned in a controlled fire by the local fire department to make way for new homes. At the time, it felt as though the whole village was on fire. In less than 2 hours, half of the village's history was burned to the ground. I believe it has to be our responsibility as citizens of a larger community to forge an honest partnership with the residents of different villages, the historic organizations, public agencies, to secure the history of future generations. We have to teach folks the value of their history, and with education, hopefully they will feel that there are some things more important than money. We have to teach people how to preserve their history through restoration, oral history recordings, family reunions, and even obituaries. All of these things honor the past and create fond memories that last generation after generation. Today's Unionville has 56 homes many seventh and eighth generations of the founders, some new homes built by Habitat for Humanity, and several new families that are white and Latino. Diversity has come to Unionville. St. Stephen's AME Church members celebrated 150 years in 2017. And now we've started a serious effort to organize the church records of the cemetery, draw up a plaque that lays out the cemetery and the headstones, record the names of every visible burial on the grounds, restructure the price of plots, and continue the maintenance and responsibilities as stewards of the church and the cemetery. St. Stephen's AME Church members and Friends of Unionville continue to raise funds for several needed projects. Improvements to preserve and maintain the historic cemetery by creating a landscape memorial garden park featuring the 18 Union soldiers. Replace the windows of the now 156-year-old church with stained glass. Renovate the restrooms in the church, renovate the kitchen, extend the Martha R.C. Green Parish Hall, and create and distribute to all new residents and visitors a welcome brochure of information on the history of Unionville and its founders, past and present residents and their accomplishments, and St. Stephen's AME Church history and church service. We feel that it is our responsibility to continue to educate. We have many treasures in Unionville. Our village is historic if there were never a marker to declare it so. We have seventh and eighth generations of families still striving, surviving, and thriving here. After slavery and the Civil War, we were farmers. Today, many are entrepreneurs. We have had a CEO of Verizon Maryland, born and raised in Unionville. Once there was a one-room schoolhouse with one teacher, and today we have educators of every level that came from Unionville. In 1871, our ancestors built a church for their families, and today we have ministers of several different denominations from our village. We can be proud that we have veterans who have served and fought in every war since the Civil War. Our ancestors would be proud that the Boldens, Claytons, Coopers, Coppers, DeShields, Deals, Greens, Haymans, Jacksons, Monies, Roberts, Suttons, and many more families like them are still carrying on the tradition of bringing families together to celebrate and honor the past. We want everyone, especially people now moving to our village, to know that they are joining a community already bursting with pride in our past, holding on to the present and looking forward to what the future holds for all of us. This village of Unionville has produced a great legacy of teachers, ministers, carpenters, inventors, entrepreneurs, and small businesses. The people here are faith-filled and peace-loving. To those that visit with us in Unionville, we want you to know that we continue the legacy left by our ancestors. For the families that are moving here, we want you to know the rich history of the village that you have chosen as your new home. Our ancestors had vision and courage, and we are very proud to be descendants of such brave men and women. It is now our heritage, and we cannot forget what sacrifices they made to leave us a proud and peaceful village. Thank you. Give a PowerPoint with pictures that go with the stories. So, and then after that, we'll do a Q&A. But thank you for clapping.
Like 3 chances in class.
Oh, I should have, y'all already, okay. A family story from a bloody river of sacrifice to a proud, faith-filled family of survivors. And I'll explain that in a minute. Right now. This is an excerpt from Frederick Douglass's book, his narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. And he describes here the overseer who killed Debbie. He doesn't say why, and Frederick Douglass has written this in a second book of his, My Bondage and My Freedom. And he explains the kind of overseer this man was. And a lot of the overseers weren't like that. They would at least laugh or joke or do something every once in a while with their enslavement. But this man did nothing like that. And and Denby was one of the slaves that was everybody liked. And he knew what skill he had, and his skill had to do with horses. I know that. And he was very good at it. But something happened, and from what Frederick Douglass said, and I want to say this too, that is always important to me. Frederick Douglass was 8 years old. And we found, if you read any of his books, it's amazing how his brain worked and how much he remembered. But anyway, we know that as a man who dealt with horses, and it was hot that particular day, and he was brushing down the horses from the story I've heard. And the overseer wanted him to do something else or whatever. But anyway, he started beating him or whipping him. And Denby ran into the river. And so when that happened, and and Gore, who was the overseer, started loudly saying, "Get out of the water." So slaves started coming around, circling the river, and even from the story, Mr. Lloyd came up as well on his horse. And so Gore said something like, "Get out of the river." And so Denby didn't. I feel like Denby, that was the rock he was going to stand on that day. And so Gore said, on the count of 3, "Get out of the river or I'm going to shoot you." And so he counted 1, 2, and he fired the gun. So blood was everywhere, and he ran down the river. And they say that Mr. Lloyd said, "Why did you do that?" And Ford said, "We have to teach all of them a lesson. If you kill one, the rest of them will think twice before they do anything." And so I say that to say that reading up on DNA and things like that, I'm learning that, and you might think about this yourself, that whatever's inside of you can be passed on to other family members. And so, even though my grandfather and my grandmother were not living or involved then, I believe that all Denbys, all enslaved people, made a choice that when emancipation came, like I said, they were going to move forward. And so part of that was something that as I grew up knowing, living here and going anywhere, that most Black people would have their head down all the time. And so it was always a thing about raising your head because they would always have it down, but they were always conscious of what could happen. You couldn't look anybody in the eye, or you couldn't look a white person in the eye. And other things that they was built into them. And so I am always proud of the fact that through all of that, they were surviving and thriving. That is my grandmother, my great-grandmother. And that was a portrait that was on the floor. So my husband had it fixed up and then reframed. And one of the things that I started doing when we found after we moved into our house was I had one grandson at that time. I had 2 grandsons, and this is how long ago it is. My oldest will be 25 next month, and the youngest will be 22 in December. From the time they could walk, I would take them to an area that I had set up in our house where that picture is on the wall, and then there's a small table under it, and it has all the family pictures on it. And so, and my husband thought I was crazy, but as soon as they could walk, I would tell them who it was. And if they knew the routine, when they came to BB's house, the first thing they had to do after hugging BB was to go to that area and point out who they knew. And then as they grew older and would talk, we would talk about giving the names to the pictures and things like that. And so they got to know who everybody was. And then we do other things, but that was most important at that time. This is what I got from the census in Annapolis. The household of Benjamin Denby. And his father was Nathan at 60. And you can see they have the occupation. And most of you have seen things like this, so you know. And Benjamin was 40 in 1870. And a laborer. And his wife Charlotte, 37. Daughter Agnes, my great-grandmother, and Liza or Lizzie, 8 is her sister. And then 10 years later, you see the household of Henry Green, which is my grandfather, yes. And his family at that point, they had a laborer. Most people in Unionville had somebody that was living with them and that helped them with whatever, but teachers mostly were housed in families in Unionville, a lot of teachers. And they didn't have anywhere else to stay because most of them came from across the bridge. And you can see that one is William Webb was a boarder there, and he was a school teacher. And you see how they list the race. But what also was interesting that I pointed out to somebody, this was 10 years later, and I saw something that was different. I can't remember what now. But anyway, what was it? Brenda, do you remember? It was something that was different in terms of the age.
I think Charlotte.
I think it was.
Charlotte.
I can't say it was 10. So they could have had Agnes's age. It might still be correct, and it just might have been several months before she became 24. That might be it. But anyhow, that's the one census record that I had. And this is one of the plaques that they have in front of. This one is in front of the cemetery, I think. There's one in the very front of the cemetery where it used to be Parish Hall. And I'll talk about that later. Anyway, sorry. And this is Benjamin Denby's headstone. Now, this is my grandfather and grandmother. And my grandmother died when I was 3, so I don't remember her. But did I do that? Oh, there. And the reason I put this here is not only because this is what I show my children, but my mother has 11 siblings. And the oldest one, her name's Aunt Mary. She's not there. She's in Baltimore by this time. This picture was taken in 1940 something. And I wanted to put the one down there as the same family without my grandmother and grandfather because this was done in the mid-60s. And my grandfather died in 1964, so he's not there. But both of these are taken on the property where I am, my grandparents' home. So you can see every Sunday, not only was everybody there, but by this time, by the 60s, my mother had 6 kids, and the rest of them, my uncles, only one had a son, and the other 3 didn't have any children of their own at that particular time. They married women who had children, and they were older. My aunts, there was my oldest aunt had 1 child, and the twins had 1, and My Aunt B had 3. My mother had more than any of them. That's my mother. And I don't know what year that is, but I want y'all to see my mother. And if this was I don't know if this has a pointer or not, but I would have pointed out my mother to you in other pictures. But I guess I can I walk over and do that?
So is your mama
This is,
or Denby or?
this is my mother here, and that's her here.
So was she a Green or Denby?
I'm sorry,
Was she a Green or Denby or what?
Green,
She was a Green.
Green. Yeah, it's green. Let's see. This is St. Stephen's AME Church in Unionville. The first structure that they built caught fire, and that's why the second structure, I think I have it here, that it was built in 1892, I think it was. This is where they had the ceremony honoring the 18 in Washington, D.C.
Where is that in Washington DC?
Washington, D.C.
Where?
I should give you a better description than this, but this is the one I have for now. You know where Chili's, what is it called, Chili's Bowl?
Ben's Chili.
Ben's Chili's Bowl, right around the corner from Ben's. That's my memory.
Good landing.
But it's on like 14th Street, 14th or 13th Street. This is the fire burning of the Oddfellows Hall. This is what it looked like before. I think that. Wait a minute. No, this is the schoolhouse. This is the schoolhouse. That's the schoolhouse on fire.
It's a shame here. If they could have moved it,
Yeah.
but nothing else.
I can't hear.
They could have moved it.
Yeah. There are several things they could have done, and money was being collected for it, but. This is after church in Unionville, St. Stephen. And several cousins and uncles are in the picture. That's my grandparents' house. And that's my Aunt B. Aunt B lived, and you'll see that later, but she lived to be 100. She died a month before her 101st birthday. These are cousins in the yard. And these are my aunts also. That's Aunt B all the way on the end. As a matter of fact, they were visiting one of my uncles who was at the House of Pines at the time. And for those who are new here, it used to be called House of the Pines. I think it's gone back to that now, I think.
Yes.
But it's been named, but it's a assisted, no it's not, it's a nursing home. Nursing home. That's Aunt B when she was 98. And this is a lot of combined, my husband's family and our family, we lived in Baltimore, and we were moving to the Eastern Shore a month after this. So everybody was like the last dinner or something. This is Aunt B.
Are you in that one? The previous one?
Yeah, but you can't see it. I am, but I'm not prominent in this picture. But it's me back there. Well, my mother-in-law is right behind me with the white sweater on. That's my mother-in-law, and I'm right in front of her kneeling down. That was when I was much younger. Oh, maybe I should show you. This is our son, Bomani is his name, but we call him Bo. And this is my daughter-in-law. And this is our, I'm not doing that. Oh, wait a minute, which way is this going? There you go. What was I gonna say?
Grandson, maybe.
My mother-in-law, cousins, my daughter-in-law's parents are there. And this is where my cousin was shot. I am not doing this, Justin. But this is my cousin. He grew up in St. Michael. And that's Aunt B's son. Okay. Am I going backwards now?
No.
This is NB's family, my cousins. NB was getting older. I forgot what year this is. And her son, one of her, she had two sons and one daughter. Her older son was a policeman in Boston. And he retired because she was needing more care. And it was close to his retirement. So yeah, he came home to take care of her. And he died before she did. He died about 2 years after he retired. Yeah. And these are some friends that Aunt B used to babysit for in St. Michael's. And they're twins. Some of you might know them. Karen and Sharon. One's a school, I think at one time both of them were school teachers. But you can see Aunt B's face right here. She did not want to be in the Pines for nothing. She did not want to be in the Pines. And and that's how she would act a lot. And she was the nicest person before she went to the But I wanted to show you. And then they got her to smile, but she wouldn't open up. She had, I think after this, she had, I forgot what you call it. But then she had one of her legs cut off. And one day they found her, she had gotten out of the hospital and wheeled down Route 50. Because she's going back to St. Michael's.
Oh,
Anyway, that's her. And that's her 100th. On her 100th birthday, one of the politicians we had come in to, give her a, little piece of paper, whatever. And she heard people talking about it. And she was still of sound mind until she died. She was of sound mind. And they were talking about birthdays, and she kept asking, whose birthday is it? Right here. But she was something else. And this is Aunt Ray. This is a school teacher for 44 years in Talbot County. And she also taught Sunday school and Bible study. Sunday school every Sunday morning. And she wore a hat everywhere she went. And these are her daughter Corinne is in the back here. Her granddaughter is Sheila, and these are her great-grandchildren there. But she was very active in the community, very active. I think some teachers here might remember her, but she was very active in everything she did. And I think we were doing a program, so we had a picture of her there for a journey thus far. She passed away when she was 98. I think that's it. No. That's it. Okay. Q&A, I will say that if I don't know the answer, I will get it for you and contact you. So if there are any questions that I couldn't answer? Yes?
Was there any?
Can you stand up
I'm
so I
sorry.
can hear you? Can you stand up so I can hear you?
Was there any communication, cooperation between Unionville and the Hill?
And the hill? Okay. The question is, has there been any communication with the Hill and Unionville?
In the early days
In the early days. Ooh,
or the later days?
I don't know of any known communication, but I know, and some people who've been here a long time know, everybody knows everybody. And so, especially and the Hill had two churches that were prominent for school teachers. And so communication in that sense was always available. And you just say a name and they would know who you were talking about. But there weren't any organized communication or anything that they did together, anything like that, other than if it was church related, they all supported each other, every church from Easton to some of the other villages and things like that. But since the Hill has become, just before it became prominently known, the Frederick Douglass Honor Society was the first organization that opened up a dialogue between people who didn't know the Hill and people who did, to start a conversation about what can we do to promote the Hill. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You said that 100 people went to the war and 18 came back.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can,
Sorry, did you say that 100 black soldiers went and 18 came back?
yes, but it was over 100, we just don't know what the number was.
Where did the 100 come from? They weren't in Unionville, were they?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Where'd they come from?
Where did it come from?
The 100.
Oh, the 100. From what we've known from the two plantations.
Really?
Yeah, there were a lot of people on those, a lot of people on those plantations.
And that was in the Unionville area?
Yes,
Lombardy and wine,
Okay.
Lombardy and wine.
yes, Lombardy and wine. And on the Lumberly property, or Lumberly plantation, there were free blacks. The Quakers did not believe in slavery, so there were free blacks that worked on that particular property. Yes, ma'am.
Is anything known about, the soldiers, like what battles they fought in during the war?
I do know, I can tell you this, that most of them were sent to Texas. So a lot of the fighting they did were in Texas, which is also amazing because most of them walked back. If they could catch a ride with something, they would, but they started walking back. And I think that's the one that I'll have to do more research on, but I think St. Petersburg might have been another site where some of them were.
Were they some of the Buffalo soldiers?
I'm sorry about
Were they part of the Buffalo soldiers?
that. No, they were not. No, they were not. Most of the Buffalo soldiers were horsemen. Well, there's a gentleman here who has done some research too. Did you have an answer for that?
Yeah, many of the African Americans who went into the Union Army from Talbot County went to Petersburg, took part, some of them in combat, which was unusual because most black soldiers did the dirty work. They dug the ditches, they did all sorts of stuff that white soldiers wouldn't do. And they were also the last to be released from the Union Army. That's how they wound up down in Texas, because there was dirty work to be done down there after the war,
Still is.
and they couldn't hold white soldiers in the army after the war was over, but they didn't really care much about what they did with black soldiers. So most of those fellows weren't released until about 1867, 2 years after the war was over.
Harriet, was that Juneteenth? Wasn't that in Texas?
Was that Juneteenth when they were released?
Yeah, wasn't that in Texas?
No, it was
Where was
Juneteenth,
that?
in 1867.
Okay.
It was 2 years after the war ended, that Juneteenth, that they told the soldiers in Texas.
Wasn't Northwest.
Now, did you?
You said the land was leased to the original 18 for $1 a year for 30 years. Were they then granted the land free and clear?
Were they granted?
Yeah, were they given deeds to the property? so
Yes.
They were the owners?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to repeat this to those who didn't hear. Was there a deed granted to the founders of Unionville after the 30 years? The answer is yes. Yes, sir.
I may have missed this, but my question is, today, apart from St. Stephen's Church, is there some organization or some group that gets together in Unionville that kind of partakes of the process of trying to keep the spirit and the history and the lore of Unionville alive?
Yes and no. The yes part is on the celebration of the 150th anniversary of the founding of the village. There was a parade and a program, huge program and things like that. there were people, organizations and groups that came from Baltimore that was part of the ceremony and the celebration. It was a really big deal, and Bobby here was one of the participants on the program because she wrote a poem about Unionville.
I have it, if you want me to read it.
Okay, let's get everybody finished to answer questions, then we'll have you read it. And the other thing I wanted to say is, this is not a nod to anybody, but once one person starts doing something, then that person is expected to keep doing it.
Justin has a photo of the 18 soldiers that he can share to the folks at home right now. But I think he might be able to weave that into the video that you're going to send out to everybody tomorrow. Is that correct?
I could do that, yeah. So I have the picture here, I can share it to people at home, but the problem is it won't go up here unless I do it on that computer.
Let's do it when Bobby reads her poem, when she recites her poem. Can we finish answering the question? There's somebody ready. Yes.
I just want to comment, you look so much like your great grandmother. Look at this thing.
Thank you. First time I heard that. Yes, ma'am.
I know you said one of the questions that you wanted answered was your original country.
Yes,
And did you get that answer?
yes. It's West Africa.
West Africa.
Yeah. So I was really really happy to know that as well as some of the other things I was telling you about because as I got older, especially in Baltimore, and when I started working, that in Baltimore, because you know anything about Baltimore, you know that there are, I forgot what they call them now, but like, I can't think of one now. Every little area has a name.
Yeah.
You know, every little community, there's small communities. And so if you're Irish, you know that, and it's promoted in your community. And if you're just anything else, I can't think of anything right now, but you know what I mean. And but not knowing where you come from, and it's a different experience. It's a different feeling, not knowing. And so I always wanted to know where. I'll give you an example. I don't know if this is a good example or not, but I'm gonna make this short. I tell long stories. I went to a retreat when I was in my 20s. And it was a Catholic retreat. And the first night, everybody had to go around the room. It was about 30 women. It was just for women. 30, you had to introduce yourself. And what church you went to, and anything, little thing about yourself. So we were going around the room. There was a woman who was sitting to my left. And she came with the facilitator. And so we didn't know her, but most of us, because we were all Catholic, knew somebody in the room. So we were going around the room, and I say by the third person, this woman sitting next to me started crying. And so I'm looking at everybody that was over there, all looking strange, and so everybody kept introducing herself. So I think they waited until I introduced myself, and then the facilitator, or one of us, asked, "Is everything okay?" And she said that she told me what country she was from in Africa. And she said that she remembers her grandfather telling her stories about the people who were stolen from their village. And every time she looked at us, she recognized somebody from her village. And that was very, very, by the time she finished, all of us were crying. And I know that when I grew up here, a lot of, not here, but in Baltimore, in the summertime or Christmas, my friends were going south to visit grandmother or whatever, and I always went somebody south. But here in Talbot County, I don't think there's many people in Talbot County that have family anywhere more south than here. And I never thought about that until I got older, that I thought that was interesting and strange, but we probably could do a story on that as well. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is Bill Peak.
And Harriet, I want to apologize. I misread the time. I thought it was at 2:00, and so I've missed most of this. But this is being recorded, right? So I'm going to be able to watch it later. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's all right. You know,
It's hard being stupid, but I've gotten really good at it with practice.
no, you have not. No, you have not. Thanks for coming. Anybody in home or in the office have a question? Okay. Justin, you want to show the picture and then Bobby can recite her point?
I've got a question. Can you hear me? Yes,
Yes.
I couldn't quite hear with the sound where you were from in Africa. I heard it, but I couldn't quite make it out.
West Africa.
So-
Can you hear me? West Africa.
West Africa.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you know where your ancestors ended up when they came from West Africa to here? Were they brought into Baltimore or
No, Oxford.
in
The
Oxford?
Oxford Taylor. A lot of enslaved people came in from Oxford. And then after that, some came in from Eastern Port.
Right.
What do you call Eastern?
Eastern Point.
Yes.
Point.
Or more.
Have they continued the 4th of July parade?
No, they haven't.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah, and they used to have that, and they were always crowned princes and queens at that. Yeah, but no, they don't do that.
I tried opening all these. They're all really tiny pictures. And if I zoom in and see with the computer, it becomes so pixelated, it's hard to see. So I think it's about as clear as we can see it.
Okay, Bobby, you're on. And Bobby Wells is one of the families who have made Unionville diverse. He lives in Unionville.
Well, I lived up the road across, okay, I lived up the road across the bridge for most of the 80s when my children were growing over on the Kemp farm. And then I bought the Thomas house in about 2005. My husband lived next door to Earl Tillman. He was probably like super family. Anyhow, he told us about his sister was selling the place and Earl could sell anything. So we bought it and because it felt like home and we have lots of friends out in the Neck region in Copperville. So it felt like home to me. Anyhow, I read this poem because I was living in Unionville. The library had a contest, and this was sort of, they had a historical category, and I just sort of started feeling the muse, and I thought, I can do this. I can write a poem about where I live. So it's called Blue Skies in Unionville, and it's about a slave growing up in Unionville. I plant the crop and till the soil. I pick tobacco, black man's toil. Miles River Neck I call my home. Slave child soul is all I own. I catch the crab at dawn's first light. I shoot the turkey at edge of night. I feel the lash of master's fury. I dig potato, hurry, hurry. One day sweet, the next day sorrow. It's master's whim on the morrow. I hunt the deer in silent wood. Venison stew tastes mighty good. I sop the gravy with ma's corn pone, and then buff big man's boots till they shone. I fish for perch at the end of dock. Catch big old string by 6 o'clock. They fry up fine in Granny's meal, ground from corn in yonder field. Crack the whip, get on your knees. No talking back, it's yes sir, please. I sing, swing low with my kin. I hum a tune at day's end. I go to bed with fingers weary, rise up early, bright and cheery. I praise the Lord for each day. Boss man say, boy, bale up that hay. Big storm is a-comin' and trouble ahead. Master's worried and many are dead. Brother and cousin are choosing sides. Freedom's coming on rising tide. I always get choked up, sorry. Mr. Lincoln's gonna make it right. Me and Pappy going off to fight. Union soldiers, black and proud. We blow away slave man's cloud. My baby girl, she owned the earth. She never knows slave man's dearth. Sky of blue and river still. Growing free in Unionville.
Does anybody have any other questions?